So I've been asked to talk about the case studies in my book here, and just to sort of set the scene, give you a bit of context. I was an industry analyst, and being an industry analyst, you're very lucky because you get to see a lot of new technologies, leading edge technologies. So I was traveling to various destinations, seeing innovation centers and delivery centers set up by various technology vendors as well as service providers. So I was seeing the kind of leading edge stuff that they were doing, but I was also seeing the other side of the equation, the buy side of the equation, and seeing what enterprises are achieving. And I have included some data in the book from my ex-colleagues at Everest Group, which shows the phenomenal kind of returns that some of them, particularly the ones that are mature in adopting this kind of technology we're achieving, and the results are really breathtaking. So it doesn't take long to put two and two together, that we're getting this kind of incremental automation going on in enterprises. And at the same time, the ones, there is a bit of learning. I know there have been some that have been disappointed, but there is a bit of learning. And when we learn how to implement it well, we get great results. And, you can only... I'll just refer you back to the lady from NHS just before lunch. They were achieving great results and freeing up the medics to do more medical care. So where does this road lead to? We're getting bit by bit, you're doing about something like 70% of financial transactions being processed automatically, doing the invoice processing. We're increasingly doing a lot of HR on a self-service as well as automated processing. We heard about doctors being onboarded and those that leave as well, having to manage all of that. So what's the sum of all this incremental automation? And in my view, we're on the road towards the autonomous enterprise. And when I say the autonomous enterprise, I don't mean that it'll be without humans. I mean that the bulk of transactional and simple decision making will be done automatically, but people will be very much still there. It will be human in the loop, and they'll be managing those technologies, they'll be maintaining them, they'll be developing new capabilities, as well as, of course, developing the business and designing the user experiences and so on. So with that in mind, let me just talk to you about the case studies in the book. And I think these show some of the benefits very clearly and the increasing level of automation as well. The first one is the Bionic Customer Service Agent at Siemens Global Business Services. I'm sure it doesn't come as any surprise to you that Siemens Global Business Services is heavily into technology, and this is not the only thing that they've done. I've talked to them about some of the other developments in their organizations, for example, combining RPA with intelligent solutions so that they can monitor when machines need maintaining, so preemptive alerting and recommendations for that. Similarly about stock control, so being able to manage stocks dynamically. These are just some of the examples, loads of RPA everywhere, but also adding the intelligent part to some of those solutions. They're a massive organization. They have something like a dozen delivery centers around the world, and they deliver services such as finance, HR, business services, etc. And they get something like 7 million service tickets a year they have to process. So the customer interactions generate this many service tickets. And so they decided they were going to automate this and designed a bionic agent, basically a virtual agent. They developed it in-house with a bit of help from Microsoft. And initially, it was purely signposting. It's largely a natural language processing machine, and it was initially just signposting, sending those service tickets to the right organization, part of the organization to be handled. But as time went by, it got better at what it was doing, and it now does something like 70% of the service ticket processing, significantly speeding things up. But the humans are still involved. They're very much humans in the loop, and they do the quality checks. They call them the quality gate processing people. They handle exceptions. So if you think, 7 million service tickets, if you just shave off something like 5 minutes of processing each one of those, you'll be saving huge amounts of money. And that is why I think we will be moving towards the autonomous enterprise. And they've designed it with reusability in mind. So they're going to be able to retrain and redeploy this bionic agent to other areas of business as it is, that it's sort of going through all the different functions that they do and automating more and more of each of those functions. So that was Siemens Global Business Services. The next one I absolutely love. It's AI in stroke care at Royal Berkshire Hospital. It's all to do with wanting to improve care for patients who particularly present out of hours. Because if you have a stroke in the middle of the night and you're taken to the emergency ward, chances are that a specialist isn't available, and that significantly reduces the case of stroke. Every second counts, and major strokes can lead to permanent disability and death. So this was led by the specialists. They wanted to make sure that there was better care. They have this measure, which is the door in, door out time, DIDO. And this shows them how quickly a patient was brought into hospital and then taken to have specialist care. Not all strokes are major. Some of them can be easily dealt with medicine that they give them to dilute any kind of brain clot that there might be. But there are others. Major strokes can cause big clots in the brain, and they will need medical intervention by the way of what they call a thrombectomy, a mechanical thrombectomy. So that really requires very specialist skills working on the brain. And there are certain centres that have these specialists and other hospitals don't have them. So it's really essential to diagnose if the patient has got a major requirement and if they need to take that patient to a specialist hospital very, very quickly. So what they've done is they started looking at solutions that would look at the brain, the CT scans of patients' brains, and identify what the level of damage really to the brain. And it's not that the doctors can't do it. This is a complementary solution. The thing is that when you're taken to an emergency ward, they tend to be generalists. They're doctors that are there to deal with a variety of issues. But with a brain, with a stroke, you need specialist care. And so they had started already looking at it. They've deployed a solution from a company in Oxford which actually looks at the image from the CT scan, identifies where the damage has occurred and how big the damage is. It even does this kind of time interval blood flow. It identifies how blood is flowing through the damaged area and how serious it is. But it doesn't replace the doctor. It always needs a doctor to agree. And the beauty of this is that during the pandemic, it allowed specialists to have, because they had this new system, and then because of the pandemic, they deployed it on cloud. The specialists, no matter where they were, whether they were self-isolating or working in another hospital, they could access the images on their handheld devices and with high precision, high definition images. And this meant that they could basically refer the patient to a specialist very quickly. So that part was done, and also understand very, very fast how much care that patient needed. So they've shrunk that DIDO time, that door in, door out. They've reduced it by a good 70%. And when I was writing the book, when I was talking to them at the time, they were telling me that they have very early indications that the rate of the patients returning to normal life after a major stroke has also improved. So the timing was totally accidental that it happened to be at the same time as the pandemic, but it was of great help to them during the pandemic. The other thing is that AI, we're all afraid of general artificial intelligence. We think that it's going to be some kind of horrid monster going to take over the world. But these are very narrow applications of AI. These are very specialist applications of AI. And in this case, it can only analyze the images for strokes that have happened in the front of the brain. About 20% happen at the back of the brain. So the doctors who led this project, they actually want to be able to expand the capabilities so that everyone is covered, no matter what kind of stroke you have, what age group you're in. They're really looking at that. So they're on their journey towards automation. And of course, about the administrative side of things, you heard how they are automating in hospitals. They're automating a lot of the administration, patient records, leavers and joiners, etc. So that's the Royal Berkshire Hospital. The next one is the virtual agent at Calderdale Council. So we talked about the bionic agent at Siemens Global Business Services. It's with that company, you expect them to be very tech savvy and having these big capabilities. But when you get to a small council, it takes a lot of guts to actually invest in these things. But they had huge problems with budget cuts and demand going up because of the aging population. They had capacity issues. So in about 2014, they started looking at how they can do more things digitally. So they revamped their website. They introduced things like web forms, and they introduced a chat channel as well. But the chat was manual, but it was the agents that replied through the chat channel. So a little while later, they decided they were going to automate that, and it was part of this bigger strategy, part of this bigger encouraging citizens to go through the digital channels, that they went about deploying this intelligent virtual agent called Vira. And so what they've done is the best practice that I really liked about this. They basically involved all the teams that were involved in developing it were led by the contact center agents. So there were people in the business. They knew exactly what needed to be done. It was business led, not technology led. And they also had a load of information that they could use. So when it came to training Vira, they had the previous chat channel information, so they could train Vira to learn how to answer, the kind of phrases, the intents that people came with, and the kind of phrases that they used. Also, the agents, using their experience, were able to create a long list of the kind of phrases that people use when they are in those channels. So it was really important to get Vira to actually be effective and be able to deal with the inquiries that were coming in. I think we've all had experience of poorly deployed virtual agents, haven't we? We've all had things that just fail on the first exception, any kind of variation. So it's this best practice that I really like about this deployment. And as time's gone by, they've trained the agents to be able to extend the vocabulary that is used by Vira. So during the pandemic, this meant that they could retrain it so that it could actually deal with the regulations and the requirements that the government was literally introducing at short notice. So it was another benefit to them that they hadn't expected, which was being able to answer queries from their customers when everything was changing so quickly and so frequently. And it now takes about half a day to extend Vira's vocabulary, teach it the new intents, and test it and run it. And they also managed it in a very kind of fail fast, learn quickly kind of environment, managed it in a risk free environment internally first. And the other thing is they constantly review it. So they survey their customers and they're getting comments like, oh, I didn't know I could do this out of hours. I'm really pleased I could do this out of hours. And they've also created a dashboard which matches intents to how they were answered, how the questions were answered, and any issues are picked up and addressed. They also look at the jump-off points. Where is it that the customer jumps off and then comes into the council offices or rings them, and what was the reason for that? So they have this kind of correlation analysis that goes on behind the scenes so they can improve Vira. So to me, that really is best practice. They've developed it, they've evolved it, they've enhanced it, and they continuously monitor it to see what else they need to be doing. Am I still okay for time? Yeah? Shall I do the last one, or shall I stop and see if there are any questions? Do the last one. Okay, the last one is about sales optimization at Wartsila, which is the Finnish company, and this is their marine and power unit. And they're using what is called configure price quote system. It's not new. It's been around for about 10 years. And the reason I included it is because firstly, it uses a completely different kind of artificial intelligence. It's good old-fashioned AI and also called symbolic. And what they've done is they've complemented that with machine learning. So the way it works is that they capture information from experts, the people who would be selling these complicated engines to their customers. And these marine and power engines are absolutely massive. They could be the size of a massive room with a lot of moving parts, with a lot of components, components that have components, and a lot of flexibility in where things could be placed, what power rating the customer might want. So it's a very complicated ordering requirement, and it would take many, many hours if they were doing it manually. So about 10 years ago, they moved down this route of automating it, and the way it works is that they capture information from experts, and just think how brilliant that can be with low code. So the experts can almost encode their own knowledge into these systems. So it captures the knowledge and iteratively works with the expert to actually refine it. And it then creates what is called a constraint tree, which is within this constraint, you can only make these types of decisions. So if you're buying an expensive PC but had very little budget, the constraint will be the budget. You're not going to be able to afford the top quality PC with a small budget. And that's the kind of thing, the kind of constraints that it identifies. And then it works out how do these constraints limit what can be done as you travel down the decision tree that will eventually lead you to the specified product. And when they first started, they weren't doing these trees correctly. They were sort of jumping from very little detail to a lot of detail, missing some of the steps in the middle. So it wasn't working properly, but they learned how to fix that issue. And they've gone on, they've never really looked back, and they've deployed AI in many other fields as well. Some of the benefits, apart from freeing up all these technical agents that would have done the specifications, they've gone on to then link it with their order processing. They've linked it with their supply chain system. So, for example, components and parts, they know whether they're low on something, and they can order those ahead of time before the order is completed. So they've optimized a lot of their processes behind the scenes as a result of this. And the other advantage is that sometimes customers come and get a quote, specify everything, but then go away and take time to decide what they're going to do. It could be as long as a year before they come back and order something. But because they have these records and the specifications that incidentally now go automatically to the engineering teams as well, they're able to revamp that quote. They're able to see what no longer applies, if a component is no longer available, if some design change has happened, and they're able to update it. So really increasing the efficiency with which they do the quoting and customization for their customers. So there's sort of, to those of you who are practitioners, really none of this would be surprising. The lessons are, it's joined up, they're all joined up. So one way or another, they're bringing the people who are impacted on board, all the stakeholders on board, they're getting buy-in from them. They're managing the risks, they want to learn, and they want to learn by doing things and understanding what the risks are and then managing those risks. They're developing in-house skills really fast. So Siemens had already got people that were specialists in this field, still needed some support from Microsoft, so they were complementing what they already had, the skills that they already had. Wartsila brought in a specialist, worked with them, and then took over the development of this kind of configure price quote system for other things in other parts of the business. That itself is another lessons learned about reusing and sharing skills and knowledge. Almost all of them do exactly that. They're not reinventing the wheel. If there is unless there's a good reason, they are going with solutions that are pretty much off the shelf. And the only reason that Siemens went with their own product was because they wanted to be able to deploy it, change it, and deploy it in future for other things. But all the rest of them have gone to vendors that provide solutions off the shelf. So some of the lessons learned. And that brings me to questions. I just wanted to say, just before we go to questions, I have brought a couple of copies of the book, and while I'm here, you're more than welcome to flick through, and if you want to read more about these case studies, you're more than welcome to borrow it while I'm here.
That was going to be my question. Is it available on Amazon, or where is it available, Sarah?
Yes, it is available on Amazon. It's actually published by the British Institute for IT, BCS. I'm sure some of you are members of that. It's also available from their website, the book publishing website, yeah.
Okay, that is excellent. So you are joining the panel, aren't you, later?
Yes.
So can we save questions for the panel,
Sure.
if that's okay? But thank you very much, Sarah. That's brilliant. Great case studies.
Thank you.